Trafalgar off the coast of Spain. This ended Napoleon's power on the sea. The cannonades and musket shot ripped apart the ships at point-blank range, killing or wounding nearly 10,000 men. In the fighting that ensued, Admiral Nelson was fatally shot in the spine. He was carried below deck to the ship's surgeon, where he died. His last words were, "Thank God I have done my duty."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, our country, in my opinion, has never seen an invasion on our soil like what has occurred in the last 3.5 years. I mean, on day one of the new Biden-Harris administration in 2021, the Trump executive orders lifted. The welcome mat was laid out. Millions have crossed our borders illegally. To know that FEMA funds were depleted in order to supply housing and food and medical care for those who are here illegally. Apartment complexes being taken over by Venezuelan gang members. Just reported today, a small village near Cincinnati, Ohio, being invaded by Mauritanian illegal immigrants from Africa. Violent crime a concern, with many being released right back out on the streets. And with an election looming, the concern is over illegal votes being cast in this election. Much misinformation concerning border security is coming from national media. So joining us today to set the record straight, we welcome back Mark Krikorian, a nationally recognized expert on immigration issues, serving as the executive director of Center for Immigration Studies. They're an independent, nonpartisan research organization examining and critiquing the impact of immigration on the United States. He has testified many times before Congress, has published articles on many outlets as well. Mark, thank you for joining us here on Crosstalk.
Happy to be here.
One of your team members, Andrew Arthur, just released a story this past Friday indicating in a recent Harvard-Harris poll, immigration is the second leading cause, or second leading issue, that is, heading into this election. This, Mark, is really front and center on many people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the number one issue is almost always the economy broadly, defined, whether it's jobs or inflation. It's, pocketbook issues. And so in a sense, you kind of have to put that to one side because that's always the number one issue that people are thinking about because they got to make a living. The real issue is what are the second and third top issues, that sort of thing. And immigration is right up there. It's been second in most polls for, a couple of years. And it'll fluctuate a little bit, but it's this screaming red light for the Harris campaign that they just can't respond to. I mean, she just won't. Look, I even wrote the kind of thing that she could say, where she could say, for instance, we wanted to return decency to the immigration system, but we overshot the mark in our zeal. And we're on the right track now. Something like that. I don't know. Just acknowledge that something went wrong. Yeah. They can't do it. They just can't.
Mark, and your organization, our organization, we do not endorse candidates on this program, but we certainly talk about their views and policies. So we compare and contrast. And Vice President Harris can't think of any policy or any way she would have done things differently than President Biden. She said that. So it's really, fair to consider her border policies as one and the same as President Biden. And Mark, you have followed the immigration issues for many, many years. Just to go front and center in people's minds, how did the Trump administration handle the border compared to the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, they actually tried to enforce the border. It's kind of like Brett Baer, this is the Fox News guy who interviewed Kamala Harris. Also, this is now a couple of years ago maybe, interviewed DHS Secretary Mayorkas. And he said to him, is it the goal of the Biden administration to dramatically reduce the number of people coming across the border illegally? And his answer, he would not answer. He wouldn't say that's what their goal was. He would say, well, we just want to make sure everybody has access to our legal system or something like this. Whereas what happened under President Trump is, in fact, they were trying to reduce and, ideally eliminate the illegal crossings across the border, period. That's the issue. And there was still a lot left to do when President Trump left office. Not everything got done, but most things got done. It was stabilized. That's the issue. In other words, nothing's perfect, but it was stabilized. These guys literally kicked out or unplugged everything that the Trump people had done to stabilize the border, and it was no surprise that it just spun out of control.
Well, you mentioned Brett Baer, and yes, she was really, cornered, confronted by him on Fox News about issuing an apology to the families of girls who, had been raped or killed by illegal aliens and those who'd crossed the border on her watch. Were you satisfied with the answer she gave?
No, it was inexcusable because, look, there's always going to be illegal immigrants who commit crimes. I mean, that's just the way it is. A lot of people, things happen. This is a broken world. But when your administration takes an illegal immigrant into custody and then illegally lets him go into the United States, if that person commits crimes, those crimes are on your head as well as him. You're a sort of an accomplice. So the Biden-Harris administration is, in fact, responsible, directly responsible for a lot of these crimes. These, that poor girl in Georgia who was killed and others, again, people that they let go into the country. If an illegal alien sneaks past the Border Patrol and they can't find him, they don't catch him, he ends up committing a crime, that's bad. The government obviously should have done a better job, but they're not directly responsible for that crime. A lot of these are people they had in their hands, supposedly vetted. They're saying that they checked them out and then let them go, and they commit crimes. Well, that's on you. I'm sorry. And that requires some kind of acknowledgement of responsibility. And Vice President Harris did nothing. She just said, well, I feel for them. It's really bad. And let's talk about Donald Trump some more.
And it's not only you saying this. I mean, former President Clinton said the same thing. He is out campaigning just recently for Vice President Harris, and he even referred to violent crime being committed due to a lack of vetting. It's short. Here's what he had to say.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up, so we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work, there wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
Okay, so he's talked about, not proper vetting going on.
No, of course not. And look, some of it is because they're not, doing, in other words, they're vetting incompletely. But another part of the problem is, how can you vet somebody from Venezuela? What information are you checking? All you can check, really, is whether they have a criminal record in the United States already, and maybe they check, and they don't even do this in all cases, some kind of Interpol international database to see if they're, terrorists or something. We have no way of finding out whether a person is a murderer in Venezuela. It's not like the communist government there is going to tell us one way or the other. So this is why you don't let people loose into the United States who have no right to be here. The law, the immigration law, says anybody who comes in illegally or just walks up to a port of entry and says they want asylum, they are required by law to be kept in detention until their case is resolved. This administration just lets them go. They couldn't care less. They've let millions, probably something, it's hard to keep track, but probably something like 6 million people who have no right to be here. They're inadmissible aliens is what they're called. No visa, no nothing, whom they just let go into the United States. That's not even counting the people who snuck past the Border Patrol, the so-called gotaways. it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and just at the first question was early questions dealing with compare and contrast, between the Biden-Harris administration and the Trump administration. And you have heard her say repeatedly, Vice President Harris, blaming President Trump for the crisis that we're in now. She has said he has stopped the legislation. It was making its way through Congress. So what can you tell us about this legislation she's referring to? She's blaming our current crisis on President Trump. She said this legislation would have secured our border, given us more agents. Would you set the record straight on this, Mark?
Sure. She's actually talking about two separate bills, but the one that she usually talks about that you just referred to is a bill that there was one Republican on it, Senator Lankford from Oklahoma, who probably rused the day he ever had anything to do with this. And that's the bill that would have funded more Border Patrol agents, but it also would have formally codified, made legal, this administration's illegal actions. It would have required the release into the United States of hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens, even if a measure that that would trigger a border shutdown, even if that happened, they were still required to let in people and let them go into the United States. It would have made things significantly worse. It's just a talking point that they're using. Republicans all rejected it. Before Trump ever heard of it, they said this is dead on arrival. This is not something Trump killed. And when it was brought up for a vote in the Senate, a whole bunch of Democrats voted against it too. So this whole storyline that the vice president's campaign is using is bunk.
Yeah, so I had one previous guest talk about that had this passed, this legislation would have given more agents, but it would have enabled the agents to process people here into our country quicker, to be here on illegal status, but to process them quicker.
Yeah, that is the point. Unless you change the policy, having more personnel at the border just means you accelerate illegal immigration, and that's obviously something we don't want. Congress has passed legislation with various limits on immigration, numerical limits on this family category and that employment category. Whether you may think that's a good idea or bad idea, but the point is that's the law. And what this administration has done over 3.5 years is basically just set up their own immigration system that is unconnected to the law and not subject to the limits Congress passed. And there's no excuse for it. I mean, this is a constitutional problem in addition to just being bad immigration policy.
Mark, I'd like to get your analysis of the vice president visiting the border last month. Vice President Harris was there. I believe she was standing in front of the wall that Donald Trump had built and touting border security and we need to get this problem taken care of. What's your analysis of that visit?
I mean, like 3.5 years late, I'm sorry. She resisted to going to the border. The one time she did, she was kind of shamed into it. She never even actually went to the border itself. She just went to near the border in El Paso. And now, running for election, a few weeks out from an election, she decides to go. Does she really expect anybody to believe this? I mean, it's preposterous. Again, it's something politicians do. They go to the border and they pose in front of it. Yeah, I get that. That's something you do. But that's something you spend your career doing at different times, consistently. This is just a last-minute sort of desperate measure to basically fool people into thinking that things will be different under her when, if anything, they might get worse.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break here in Crosstalk. We're speaking with Mark Krikorian. He is Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies. Their website, CIS.org. And friends, if you want to get a factual accounting for what's going on at our borders and the immigration policies, check out their site, CIS.org. But we are hearing from Vice President Harris that, hey, there's a decline in these encounters at the border. What's the deal behind that? Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, the age-old question, is it true that man evolved from the apes?
No, it is not, Chris. Humans were created separately. The animals, including the apes, were created after their kind, but humans were created in the image of God. Man is not related to the animals. But according to evolution, we are descended from the animals. It used to be thought that a rodent, a rat-like animal, was the common ancestor of all the mammals, but a recent study showed that the closest living relative of the common ancestor is the aardvark. How about that? We came from an aardvark. Chris, isn't it about time we recognize the evolutionary view as abject foolishness? Isn't it time we go back to Genesis and get it right?
If you'd like to go back to Genesis, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org. For the Institute for Creation Research, I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
Illegal immigration, setting the record straight. Our topic today here on Crosstalk. Mark Krikorian is with us today, a nationally recognized expert on immigration issues. He is the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. Again, their website, CIS.org. That's CIS.org. So, Mark, we keep hearing over and over, and, we're saying, hey, our policies are now working. We've drafted some orders now, and lo and behold, our encounters at the border are in decline. So, Mark, how do you account for that? Are we seeing a quick turnaround in our nation?
Not really. There's a couple of reasons the statistics of Border Patrol arrests at the border are going down, and they really are going down. But it's not because there's some huge change in immigration flows. There's two big reasons it's happening. One is this administration is letting in people through what's called parole who have no right to come into the United States. It's 70,000 plus a month using what some people may have heard of the CBP One app. That's Customs and Border Protection. It's a phone app that was developed under Trump, but it was basically just a normal traffic management tool for people, trucks and buses coming across the border, just a regular, good government kind of thing. These guys have turned it into a way for people to schedule their illegal immigration into the United States. I mean, I laugh, but that's what they're doing. So that's part of it.
You mean
in other words, some people aren't crossing the border illegally because the government's illegally letting them in through regular crossing points.
So if you make an appointment to come in illegally, then it's not considered an illegal entrance into our country?
Technically, yeah, basically. I mean, you're still an illegal alien. They just let you in and give you parole or something. I mean, it's just preposterous. And there's two parts to that. Without going into too much detail, you can either do that at the land crossings at the Mexican border, or for certain nationalities, they can get permission through that app before they leave and get on a plane and fly over the border straight into the United States. So that's part of it. They're letting in people supposedly legally, even though they're still all illegal aliens. The other part is that the Mexican government, the Biden-Harris administration came up with a deal in December with the Mexican government to bottle up illegal immigrants, non-Mexican, Central American, whatever they are, bottle them up in southern Mexico and keep them there so that they don't get to the U.S. border. So basically trying to get Mexico to do their job for them rather than working with Mexico and both of us trying to protect our border. What Biden and Harris want to do is not protect our border, but have Mexico do it for us. And we just had one of our people spend last week down there on the border between Mexico and Guatemala. And he said there's thousands, tens of thousands of people bottled up there. There's no way that's sustainable. They're basically just doing it until November 5th. And they figure once the polls close on Election Day, then they don't have to pretend anymore. And you're going to see a rush for the border, whichever candidate wins.
Wow. So this, this is rather secretive. I mean, the American people don't know about this agreement that we made with Mexico for this, what do you call it, internal deportation?
That's what they're calling it. So that, in other words, if somebody makes it to the northern border, they're actually rounding up people before they get to the Rio Grande. And like if they're Central American, or they're all kinds of things. They're from Africa and Asia, you name it. And flying or busing them back to southern Mexico to kind of, hold them there, blockade them down there. And apparently, there's several things. It looks like we are paying them money, basically kind of protection money, but also we're letting in a lot of Mexicans on parole. So they're not applying for asylum. We're just letting them in basically illegally to work. And, it's not clear what else we've given them in exchange for this, but there's definitely some kind of quid pro quo. Whereas under Trump, we were enforcing the border ourselves, but told Mexico, you need to help us do this job. And if you don't, we've got all kinds of tools, tariffs, and other things we're going to use against you. So they twisted their arm. Instead, these guys aren't twisting their arm. The Mexicans are twisting our arm.
Yeah.
It's just another sign of the sort of weakness of this administration.
I understand there's also very broad attempts in following through on this, letting people in under the Biden-Harris plan under the guise of what they call refugee status.
Yeah, that's another thing they're doing is now refugees resettlement, bringing in refugees is something that's in the law, and the president has a lot of flexibility in how many people and where they come from. What they're doing for the first time ever is admitting a big share of that refugee number from Latin America. That was never done before. It was always, it was a handful of people from Latin America, but refugees that we bring here are supposed to be people who have nowhere else to go and can't stay where they are another minute. And so we're taking people, if there's refugees from the Middle East and from other places, that's a whole other show. I think we run that badly. But what this administration is doing is turning it into just another way of immigrating, just normal immigration to the United States, when that's not the point of it. And they're letting in more Latin Americans, again, ostensibly to limit people illegally crossing the border. But if you're just letting them in anyway, in a sense, who cares whether the Border Patrol caught them or they were just waved in by the inspectors at the crossing points? It's still people who shouldn't be here.
Mark Krikorian with us today from Center for Immigration Studies. Let's talk about the Venezuelan gangs. President Trump pointed out to their takeover in Aurora, Colorado, but ABC just really pressed J.D. Vance in a recent interview saying, hey, it's not the whole city. The mayor is denouncing. That's not true. It's just some apartment complexes. And J.D. Vance, do you hear what you're saying here? I think it was Martha Raddatz. Are you listening to yourself? The takeover of apartment complexes, this is happening here on our soil. Have we ever seen this before in our country, Mark?
Not that I know of. And what she said was it was only a handful of apartment complexes.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how many is too many? One is too many. And the thing is, it's not just there. It's all over. This Venezuelan gang, it's called Tren de Aragua, and it was a prison gang. It was formed in a prison. These are hardened criminals. This isn't West Side Story. You know what I mean? In fact, these guys make the MS-13 people look a little tame. And the only reason they were able to expand here is because the Biden-Harris administration let in thousands and thousands of Venezuelans. Look, Venezuela has had this dysfunctional socialist government for a long time, years. First under Hugo Chavez and now under Maduro. And a lot of people did leave because it's obviously communism is always a failure, but they all moved to nearby countries, to Colombia and Peru and Brazil and what have you. They didn't start coming here until Biden threw the doors open and basically made it, issued an invitation for them. And guess what? They're now all over the place. Any place Venezuelans are moving, living, and they're all over the country. Some of them, they're using those communities as kind of cover for this gang activity. And, it's going to be a long time before, even if we shut down the border, it's going to be a long time before we get a handle on this new criminal gang.
Well, and you're right. I'm seeing more and more media accounts that the Daily Mail just reported a couple days ago. Dangerous Venezuelan gang members taking over 4 apartment complexes in San Antonio, Texas. It's being reported happening near Cincinnati this time, but this is individuals out of Africa that are taking over as well. And And as time goes on, how do we tolerate this as a nation? The rule of law is thrown out the window. We're seeing, certainly the escalation of crime and just a slap on the wrist.
Good question. I mean, I don't want it, but it's a question of whether enough of our fellow countrymen get sick enough of it to do something about it. And, the crime issue, when you bring this up, the apologists for open borders say, yeah, but immigrants have a lower crime rate than the native-born. Well, first of all, it's not clear that's true because the data is all over the place. They don't usually collect it. And legal immigrants are all checked before they even leave. In other words, they have to have they're checked by our consular people, and they have police reports and all that stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if immigrants overall have a lower crime rate. But who cares? Because illegal immigrants aren't supposed to be here.
Right,
and every crime committed by an illegal immigrant, even just one, is one too many. Yeah. And obviously it's way more than that. And these aren't even regular illegal immigrants. These are illegal immigrants Biden and Harris purposely let into the United States.
President Trump, if he's put back into office, he said he's going to carry out the mass deportations using the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. I'm going to have you explain what exactly that is. And I heard some of the liberal press, I might have been MSNBC, lamenting this thing. He's going to kick out of our country 20 million people that we're dependent on to pick our crops and talk about all these other many tasks that we need to have them done. So what is this Alien Enemies Act of 1798? And is this something that we're dependent upon people who are here illegally for our nation?
The first thing, the Alien Enemies Act is actually the one piece of the Alien and Sedition Acts, if you remember from high school history, that stayed on the books, that wasn't repealed. What it does is it allows the president to throw out of the country without any fuss or bother nationals of a country that we're at war with. And so if Trump does use it, it's going to be, it's going to end up in the courts, and it's not clear. We've actually written something on this. It's a complicated legal question. But they don't need that to deport people at all. First of all, the deportations even of criminals are way down under this administration. Criminals, way down, 50, 60% down from under Trump, or even under Obama. So that's like the easiest thing to do is start deporting criminals again. But on top of that, there's 1 million people in this country who have gone through, their immigration court stuff. They've gotten their what's called a final order of removal, a deportation order, and they're just here. They just ignored it. All of those people you can get rid of without any fuss or bother because they've already had their bite at the apple. There's all kinds of stuff we can do. And when people say, well, how are we going to get rid of, 10 or 15 or 20 million people? It's like, we're not going to do it all at once. Mm-hmm. You're going to start. It's like somebody asked Senator Vance this, and he said, well, look, let's deport the first million, and then we'll work on the second million. In other words, what are you talking about? It's like this idea that everything has to happen immediately. No, we need to start the process.
Right.
And once we do that, you'll see a significant number of people, especially recent arrivals, who will say, the party's over, let's pack up and go out on our own terms and not wait to get arrested by ICE.
Yeah.
And you'll see a significant outflow as well.
Mark, we'll just get this topic introduced here. Let's speak about the FEMA funds. I mean, we had two horrible hurricanes come through our nation. Secretary Mayorkas indicated low funds. They had touted before using monies for illegal immigrants. Set the record straight on FEMA funds, if you would. I tell you what, we're 5 seconds from the break. That's not fair to you. Let's take the break. We'll come back and talk about FEMA. Mark Krikorian is with us here today. CIS.org is their website, CIS.org. We're going to talk about the FEMA funds, but also the concerns about illegally cast votes in this present presidential election. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Entertainment has become the draw to build churches and youth groups. Meanwhile, sound biblical teaching has fallen off the cliff. To many, it's all about numbers and little about the Bible. Play the Flute, a powerful DVD, addresses this issue head on. Play the Flute tells the story of one youth leader who would not give up, who would not surrender to the apathy taking over his new youth group.
The Lord Jesus is looking for followers who realize that they are sinners and need a Savior. These are His terms, and I can't change them.
From Rich Cristiano comes Play the Flute, a powerful story on DVD available from VCY America for a donation of $18 or more. Call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
Mark Krikorian is our guest today from the Center for Immigration Studies. And yes, indeed, we're talking about illegal immigration, but setting the record straight. Well, one of the big controversies has been certainly the lack of FEMA funding. I mean, that's what we're told. The Mayorkas had indicated our FEMA funds were low. We're not going to be able to, we're going to have to be careful in the use of these funds. And yet earlier had been touting about how we're going to fund all this illegal immigration. Well, we were able to utilize the funding that we found in FEMA available for this. So, Mark, if you would just set the record straight for us on the FEMA funding and its use for illegal immigration.
Sure. It starts back in the 80s, Reagan administration. There were a lot of Vietnam vets who were homeless. It was a scandalous thing. And so there was this separate line item, a program within FEMA mainly to help homeless vets. That was the point. Well, what happened? That sort of just went on as it was until the Biden-Harris administration, and they broke the border, and then they hit upon this fund to use it as an emergency measure to give money to nonprofits, to NGOs that are transporting and settling illegal aliens. And that has Trump used it that way once when there was a real explosion. They had 1 year when they had a pretty high spike in illegal immigration, and subsequently tried to get rid of that sub-program. The Democrats in Congress wouldn't let him. When Biden-Harris took over, they have now turned that program into the main thing that FEMA does, the main source of money. I mean, the main thing that FEMA money is spent on now under Biden and Harris is transporting and housing illegal aliens, and giving the money usually either to municipalities that are, dealing with costs, or it's a kind of slush fund for activist groups that do the, services, give services to illegal immigrants. And, honestly, the two big hurricanes we had, obviously they were terrible for the people involved, but they did bring this issue to the fore and highlighted the fact that, wait a minute, FEMA's main job now is moving illegal aliens around the country and funding illegal settlement. And when Secretary Mayorkas said they're running out of money for hurricane relief, that's actually false, because he has the authority to move money around, to take it away from the illegal alien fund and give it to the, disaster relief fund. It's up to, he can do that. He just chose not to because, honestly, he wants to make sure that his friends in these NGOs and these activist groups continue to have access to this slush fund.
As you know, and friends, we could go on with every one of these topics, but we got many issues, and another huge concern, Mark, is about those that are here illegally casting votes in this presidential election, impacting not only perhaps the presidency, but also the makeup of the House and Senate, as well as local races. Do you share that concern? Do you have a concern about those voting illegally?
I mean, it's something we definitely should try to prevent. I don't think it's as big a danger as some people think. We're actually in the middle of running some numbers, like what share of non-citizens, legal or illegal, would have to vote to make a difference based on like last time's vote totals. And for most places, it's way too many legal or illegal immigrants, but non-citizens would have to vote more than is likely to make a difference. But in certain places, it can, in fact, make a difference. And this is why you need to prevent, you need to have tight rules about this, proof of citizenship when you register, that sort of thing. The thing is that I think a lot of people forget that even if no non-citizens vote, which is the way it's supposed to be, the very fact that they're here changes the congressional map and the electoral college map, because when they count heads, the census counts heads to decide, how many congressmen does a state get, how many electoral votes does a state get. They count everybody, including illegal aliens.
Yeah.
So if your congressional district or even state legislative district has lots of illegal aliens or lots of non-citizens of any kind, the citizens there who vote are more powerful because their vote counts more, because all of the people there are counted toward the representation, even if they can't vote and even if they don't vote. So this is a problem long before any illegal immigrant votes. It's a problem when the census takes its count.
Friends, we're opening our phone lines here on Crosstalk. Our number 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. We'll take your questions or brief comments on this issue today. Mark, you've got some information about the number of school-age migrant children arriving in our country. What have you found?
I actually don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it's huge. And look, these kids all have to go into schools. There's, their parents are obviously signing them up for school. Schools are not permitted to to limit enrollment for illegal aliens. They have to. There's a Supreme Court decision called Plyler versus Doe that says that unless Congress says otherwise, states must enroll illegal immigrant kids in schools. And, on the one hand, it's like, well, okay, they're kids, what's the issue here? Well, it's a huge draw for illegal immigration if, you don't have to, if your kids get to go to school for free. I mean, if nothing else, in the most cynical sense, it's free daycare for you to go and, work, which is what illegal immigrants are coming for. So this is something that people really don't want to think about, but it's one of the enormous impacts of large-scale immigration, frankly, even of legal immigration, but obviously illegal immigration is the most outrageous part.
Friends, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Again, that's 800-733-9829. We have Steve calling in from Tennessee. Hi, Steve. You're on the air.
Okay. Just like the gentleman just made a comment about Mayorkas, he's got the ability to move money around. Okay? These people have got way too much power. Taxpayers are the employers. The elected are the employees. How can taxpayers make term limits? How can we make those that are in office right now, if they are corrupt, how can we get them out immediately, not wait to the next voting time frame?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, in this case in particular, the House of Representatives actually impeached Secretary Mayorkas. He's the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in a long, long time. The thing is, the way impeachment works is the House of Representatives does the first step. Technically that's the impeachment part. And then the Senate is supposed to have a trial, as it were, and decide if they're going to remove the person from office. And you need a 2/3 majority. Obviously, the Democrats are in the majority anyway in the Senate. They didn't even have a trial. They just sort of had a vote. Everybody, everybody against say a nay, and they just ignored it. So impeachment is the one tool. The problem is, if one party is in favor of the person you're impeaching, they can they can block anything like that, and that's what's happened here. And Mayorkas is still there doing his job.
And what's so critical, and the caller pointed out too as well, about not having to wait till the next election. But the fact is, there are term limits in place every election cycle, and right now the only those who go to the polls and vote, Mark, are the ones who are going to make that determination if somebody's returned or rejected from office.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you think about it, every 2 years there's a term limit because there's an election, at least in the House of Representatives, every 2 years. So, that's why we have frequent elections, so that people can register their displeasure. The problem is there's all kinds of other things going on, and, these guys are able to keep their jobs.
Let's go next to Gary in Wisconsin. Gary, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Jim. I just got a couple comments. One is about the immigration people in Washington using veterans' community care funds to take care of the illegals. And I don't have access to a lot of VA facilities, so I have to go to a regular hospital.
Yeah. Mark, any word on using the community care funds for veterans?
Yeah, I don't know that specific fund. In other words, the FEMA program that was set up for veterans is the one that they've turned into basically an illegal alien funding system. There may well be more to it, but it's the FEMA part that we've actually looked into and have the numbers on.
Okay. Well, I don't like being robbed by the federal government of my health care,
Yeah.
Yep.
Gary, thank you for raising the point.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We've got Ralph in South Dakota calling. Ralph, you're on the air.
Yeah. I want to ask Mark if he had heard, I had heard that the governor of Virginia said that they were trying to clean up their voter rolls, getting non-citizens off of there. And the DOJ sued the state over this. And I just kind of thought that kind of shows where we're at as a nation. And I would also argue that non-citizens voting can make a big difference. When you have a close election like we're going to have, they could swing one state or the other, and that state could turn the election one way or the other.
Thank you for raising that issue here. On the voting issue, Mark, I just called up the Daily Signal from the Heritage Foundation. So far in 2024, there have been 29 tied elections. Now, these are on local basis and so forth, and a large number of elections just by a single vote that really can make a difference.
No, there's no question it can make a difference. And it's got to be that close to make a difference, but it can happen for sure.
Yeah.
And I haven't followed the DOJ lawsuit against Virginia too closely. I think their claim is that it's too close to an election or something like that, but it strikes me as kind of fishy, quite honestly. I mean, that's not something I've looked into in detail.
And I think Alabama is another state, same thing going on there.
Yeah. So and it's this is why you need to do this kind of thing all the time as an ongoing basis to keep your voter rolls clean. Because it's not just non-citizens. People die. People move to other states, and they don't tell the state they left. That kind of thing. So this is why voter registrar of voters is such an important job to keep voter rolls clean and up to date.
So important, friends, and certainly very important to keep your local leaders accountable. State election boards and county election boards and who makes those up and who makes the decisions is so very, very critical. We're just seconds from the break, so we're going to take the break and come back with more of your calls here on Crosstalk. Lines are all packed right now here on the program. Write down the number, though, 800-733-9829. Our guest today is from the Center for Immigration Studies. Their website is cis.org. And really to stay current on immigration-related issues, friends, you'll find a ton of material there. They know from whence they speak. They have been covering this for decades and making an impact and certainly educating this nation on where we stand on immigration, both legal and illegal immigration. And certainly we've seen the great influx of illegal immigration. More to discuss after the break. This is Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Some theologians have used 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 12, which speaks about those during the tribulation who perish because they refuse to love the truth, that they might be saved. And it says, and for this reason, God will send them a strong delusion that they should believe the lie, and that they may be condemned who do not believe the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. Some theologians have used this verse to say that anyone who rejects Christ before the rapture cannot become a Christian during the tribulation period. This is not true. This is not even what 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 is talking about. It's talking about people during the tribulation who, well, take the mark of the beast, as Revelation 14 describes, who are condemned. In fact, we have 144,000 Jews who become great evangelists. One would have to assume to some degree they have rejected Messiah, right? But in the tribulation, they become believers and great evangelists. Keep preaching to your unsaved relatives and friends.
Giving you opportunity to interact with our guest today, Mark Krikorian, who is Executive Director of Center for Immigration Studies. Lines are packed, so we're going right back to the calls here. Holding the longest is Jim, right here in Milwaukee. Jim, you're on the air.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Mark. Thank you for the informative program today. Hey, we hear these numbers of the aggregate number of people that are coming to this country illegally. Of course, we don't know the number of the gotaways, obviously, but how are we able to know what the numbers are state by state? And who, like, for example, I'm calling from Wisconsin here, like who in the state of Wisconsin would help facilitate the influx of those illegal immigrants?
Okay.
Well, we cannot give estimates state by state, but it's the sort of smaller the unit, the less accurate the estimates are likely to be. You know, because surveys and stuff, the number of people they survey in a state is smaller than the whole country, in a county is smaller than the state, that kind of thing. As far as who in Wisconsin, I don't know specifically, but the kinds of groups there, a lot of them are Catholic Charities groups, Lutheran Immigrant Refugee Services, World Relief, there's Episcopal Migration Services. There's a bunch, not all of them, but many of them church affiliated. And then there's a whole kind of universe of these nonprofit, supposedly nonprofit groups that live off of government contracts. And so they have contracts from Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, the State Department, to move people in, whether they're refugees legally or moving illegal immigrants around. They're kind of blurring the difference increasingly. But so it's, the thing to do in some cases, any of these groups, find out who it is that is like, sponsoring or commenting in the press or whatever, and say, do you guys get federal money or state money? Where's the money coming from, and what are the services you're providing?
Thank you.
Yeah. Jim, may I ask a real quick follow-up question?
On our topic, very quickly.
Yes. So the Department of Homeland Security is facilitating this influx of illegals. Weren't they created because of 9/11 and because of the attack on our country?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's ironic that the agency designed to keep people out who aren't supposed to be here is now letting in people who aren't supposed to be here.
Yeah.
But it's like darkly funny. It's not funny because of the consequences, but it is really darkly ironic anyway.
Jim, thanks for raising that issue. Let's go next to Carl in New Mexico. Carl, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'm really concerned that, you're just saying that it might take Trump years to deport all of these gangs and terrorists and these military-trained men from China and stuff. I mean, shouldn't we just be out there rounding them up and killing them?
No.
No, we're not going to be killing anybody. We wouldn't have to do that. See, I understand why people get frustrated because they say, geez, what else can we do? What we need to do is just normal law enforcement. The Border Patrol knows what to do. ICE knows its job. Now, in some cases, they may well need more resources, and there are, in fact, some legal loopholes we need to plug. That's true. But this is a normal law enforcement challenge that can be fixed if we wanted to fix it. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Look, this is in a different context, but New York was terrible in the 70s and 80s. Crime everywhere. Well, Giuliani fixed it.
Yeah.
It was a law enforcement issue, and so is this. We just have to want to do it.
Thank you, Carl. Don in New Lancaster, Kansas, you're on the air.
Yes, hello. This is Don, and I was just calling because Mark briefly commented on the impact of illegal alien children in our public schools, but I felt like he really missed the elephant in the room, which is most of us who are homeowners in the next 2 months are going to be getting our property taxes. And if you look at your property taxes, you'll see that half of what you pay to your county in taxes goes to the public schools. And I guess my point is there's no such thing as a free lunch and not even a free school lunch.
Yeah, good point, Don. And Mark, you have covered this on your CIS website.
Yeah, we've written some on this issue of property taxes, and now it depends. Different states fund their schools differently. Some states, the state legislature does it more, but in most places, property taxes are the way that schools are funded. And, the Reuters, this is a, kind of a mainstream news agency, they estimated that more than 500,000 school-age kids have moved here under, because of Biden's open borders. And it's probably even more than that. And they're not all settling, evenly throughout the country. They're going to particular places. Sometimes big cities like New York, but they're also going to smaller places like Springfield, Ohio, and Charleroi, Pennsylvania. And they can have a big impact. And, the local people there are going to end up seeing their property tax bills go up in order to try to cope with the huge number of people that Biden and Harris have illegally let into the country.
Good point. Thank you, Don, for your call. Our final call here. Let's squeeze in Al from Bridgeport, West Virginia. You're on the air.
Hey, Brother Jim, thanks for taking my call. Brother Mark, my daughter lives in Arizona. She lives in the Phoenix area. And I saw kind of a disturbing tweet. I don't know if it was real or if it was, this bot technology. Everything looks so real anymore. But it was saying that Arizona could be one of the first waves of terroristic plot of whatnot. They said IEDs, RPGs, all kinds of stuff. Have you heard any scuttle about that?
No. But but that doesn't mean it's not true. It's just that we're not going to know until something blows up. This is why one of the reasons you have a border patrol, because you want to make sure you don't let in people who could be bad guys. And there's no question. Look, the number of people who are on the terrorist watch list, the FBI terrorist watch list, who have been caught at the border is way up from under Biden and Harris than it was in any previous year. And those are just the people we caught. So, look, God willing, we're not going to have any terrorist attack from somebody they let in, but you can't just base security on keeping your fingers crossed.
Right.
Look, you lock your car when you leave it. It doesn't mean it's, perfect. Somebody could still break in, but not as many people. That's what you do with border security, and I'm just afraid we're going to see a terrible thing happen at some point in the future.
Friends, we're going to have to leave it there. Check out the website, cis.org, to stay informed on this issue. Mark, as always, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And friends, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.